Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by my on the edge co-host Tucker Hazel. And why is he on the edge? Well, that's because we're here for a topic that I have not even revealed to Tucker, but before I even reveal it to you, if you want to talk to us about Nintendo, there's a little hint for you. Be sure to join our Discord link as usual, top of the description or down there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, leave a comment,
Eh,
go hug somebody, but
why?
make sure you know them or it might be problematic.
Yeah.
Make sure everyone's
Backlog
consensual in the
Banter is
hug.
not responsible for your actions.
No, absolutely not. But Tucker, what we are responsible for is a conversation that I've been
Sure.
percolating in my head last couple days. And it's
Rattling
as
around
simple
up
as
there.
this.
It's like
Rattling
a
around.
grain of sand in an empty room.
Yes, it's a simple premise, Tucker. Nintendo
All right, we're done.
should release less games.
Sure. Okay.
That's my premise. That's the entirety of my premise.
Yeah. And do you
Because
have any? What founding do you have of this claim? I'm certainly interested. I'm not on face value. I'm not offended on a
sure.
personal level, but I am intrigued. And I'd like to hear your reasoning.
Yeah, so here's what I was thinking about, right? I was listening to Last Animators put out a whole big podcast with everybody from Sacred Symbols, everyone from Defining Duke.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about like Halo Infinite's problems was part of their
Sure.
conversation. They were talking about how Halo Infinite didn't need to release in fall of 2021.
Yeah.
It could have come out this fall. The
Mm-hmm.
game would have been better. It would have been a stronger game,
Mm-hmm.
and it would have given Forza Horizon 5, which is doing very well just a couple weeks before Halo,
Yeah.
more time to shine, give it that whole holiday season,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really salient point. They're kind of talking about how, Halo Infinite's multiplayer surprise releases, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, everybody's
Weird.
forgotten about Forza, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that Nintendo would really benefit from something very similar, right?
Sure.
And let me lay out the whole situation here. Let me take off my glasses. We're getting serious for a moment.
Okay. All right. I'll take off my shirt. Take off my pants. Take off my
Sure.
underwear.
Um, you think back in time, right? Nintendo's first party, and I'm including second party, third party systems in here, but most of their first party,
Yeah.
their exclusive games, let's phrase it that way. Their exclusive games are what sell hardware, and
Yes.
that's still true.
Always
But
have been.
for
Always will be.
right, but at the same time, their exclusive software was also basically the only software come to a platform.
Sure.
So your kind of ability to consistently engage with a Nintendo system, be it
Mm-hmm.
N64, I think to various degrees been true since the N64 generation,
Yeah.
has been predicated on whatever Nintendo or Nintendo's partners are putting out on the system at that time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think the Switch is probably the strongest Nintendo's been third party wise
Yeah.
since like SNES. Now,
Oh, absolutely.
obviously, we got a shit ton of third party software, but a lot of it was garbage,
DS,
right?
Game Boy. People were making fucking lots of
Right.
games for these
Lots
systems.
of games, but not a lot. So not
Not a lot
always
of
games of repute,
consequence.
right? I mean, DS did have a fair amount of really solid, really good third party support,
Yeah.
but when you think about the Switch, right? There are games launching weekly. There's so
Mm-hmm.
many games coming out that, regardless of what you think of the quality of the showcases, Nintendo's holding full presentations just about what other people are doing on their platform, right?
Yes.
And so we're in an environment now where Nintendo is not solely carrying sort of the cadence of their library
Sure. Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And people are engaged on Switch when, regardless of if a first party game is coming out that week or not.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we're seeing what I feel it's case by case, but a fairly noticeable, precipitous drop in quality for a number of Nintendo titles.
Interesting.
Lacking content,
Mm-hmm.
lacking polish,
Sure.
X, Y, or Z, Nintendo Switch Sports, Strikers just this year alone,
Mm-hmm.
back to back. I view this as a similar situation to what everybody was talking about Xbox's side, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was no imperative to release Nintendo Switch Sports when Nintendo Switch Sports released. Same
Yeah.
with Mario
Absolutely.
Strikers.
Mm-hmm.
And those games would have been better
Yeah. Yes.
if they came out next year.
Yeah.
And if a
Or if
good
Switch Sports had launched this fall, it would have launched
right,
with fucking golf.
right. And a better Nintendo Switch Sports
Yeah.
would have more legs to it, right?
Absolutely.
There'd be more reason to keep playing. So I just think that sort of the state of play, if you will, is different to the point where Nintendo is, I think, only hurting themselves, the longevity of their games, the quality of their games,
Yeah.
by releasing so fucking many titles. No other company,
Mm-hmm.
other than Square Enix, who's in their own trouble right now, releases as many games as Nintendo does.
Yeah.
And I just think there's no point for it anymore.
Yeah. No. So I think I think you're right. I absolutely agree with you on this premise of these games that did not need to come out yet. And frankly,
Yeah,
Nintendo's year and their sales are not particularly hurt if we don't get Mario Strikers
right.
and Nintendo Switch Sports in the first half of this year. Xenoblade 3 has been done, push that up a couple months. Maybe bridge the gap a little bit in that way. Maybe balance out the end of this year with these other titles that are releasing on top of each other coming up. But the reason that I would say I don't know if that's necessarily a true issue from the angle that you're coming out with, is we have had multiple very light and somewhat weak years in the Switch's life cycle, and we're
Yeah,
still getting those games. So it's not that they're just releasing too many games, period. It's that they feel like they need to balance their games in a weird way. We have two kinds of Nintendo games. We have
right.
the ones that launch with weak content that are light, and some of those games are the ones that are less graphically impressive, like Mario Golf Super Rush or something like that. And then there is, frankly, the majority of the Switch's first party and Nintendo games, which are incredibly contentful. They are some of the best games in their series, the best games of the generation. Those are the ones that are absolutely holding up the majority of Nintendo's output. But it's the focus that I think is on such a swing. You're either going into a Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, Splatoon. Well, Splatoon 2, that's kind of its own case. Or you're going into a Kirby Star Allies, a Mario Tennis Aces that you need to wait for that game to get to
Yeah.
the content rich. Like, those games are content rich now that they have the updates. But I feel like they're like, hey, let's put our focus on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and let's let that game have as long as it needs. And that game comes out, insane amount of content, completely content rich, no issues with that at all. Oh
Right.
shit, what are we gonna do for the first 8 months of 2018? Let's put out. And was Kirby Star Allies that year? Yeah, Kirby
That was
Star Allies,
March of that
Mario
year.
Tennis Aces, these games that are content light because we need to
Yeah.
get them out while these other games cook in the background. And I do think that has compounded to this year to where it's an even wider swing. Is last 2 years very light, releasing games that are content light in some regards, but now we're spinning our wheels to release all these games that are coming up that don't appear to be content light. And frankly, I would be surprised if a lot of these games were those content light games that you would want to wait longer, because it seems like they're all coming out and perfectly fully ready.
Well, I think I think you make an interesting point going back to 2018, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure Nintendo would have had the foresight to know, like, and I don't think that the third party content was there quite yet to support. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we can hang out, right? There was more. I think there's more of an imperative to be constantly releasing games in those early years. Let's
Yeah.
gas the system. Let's make sure everything's there. But in the year of our Lord 2022, that's
Yeah.
not the same
That is
environment,
definitely
right?
gone, obviously.
Right. And we're getting all of this content. We're getting all this content. So I think you were right for a couple of years. But
Sure.
now what's really what I come back to is what's the value in releasing these games when they're not ready?
Mm-hmm. Oh
And,
no,
and
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that there's a clear feeling of a lack of readiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even think about games that come out and are great. 2019 had games back to back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
2020 didn't, right?
Yes, absolutely.
There was no reason for that to happen, really. It
Mm-hmm.
was great as a player to go, here's Fire Emblem, and then here is Link's Awakening, and then
Yeah.
here's Luigi's Mansion, and then here's Pokemon.
And Astral Chain, Mario Maker,
And
and
right. And to the point where things start to become forgotten.
Damon
Right?
X Machina.
And now, obviously, these are games from different teams. Some of these
Yeah.
are just publishing relationships. Some of these are internally developed. Some of these budgets are paid for X and Y and Z. They're different situations, right?
Mhm.
But the cadence doesn't really make sense. We go from a game a month to like huge droughts of
Yeah.
time
Mhm.
to we finally stumble our way into a new title and it's not ready yet.
Sure.
Clearly.
Yeah.
And it just seems to not make sense to me why in an environment where there is no shortage of content to play on Switch,
Yeah.
why Nintendo doesn't just say, let's take a deep breath and let's wait.
Mhm.
Frankly, did you even really need the Xenoblade next week?
No, absolutely not.
Live Alive is out, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing in August. There's Splatoon in September, right? PlayStation manages a year on the back of like 4 exclusives because so much of their sales come from third-party
Yeah,
games. And it's
absolutely.
very important to note that the bulk the overwhelming majority of Nintendo's sales
Mm-hmm.
come from first party
Yes,
software,
no
right?
one's going to deny that.
Nobody's going to deny that.
I think it'd be pretty
Right.
stupid to deny that. You might have
Yeah.
to do a little bit of your own mental check if that you're saying that one.
And maybe the calculus is thus that that is just so important that it doesn't matter if the games come out underbaked, doesn't matter if they
Yeah.
release on top of each other, doesn't matter if they're stacked, doesn't matter X or Y or Z, doesn't matter because that's the driver of money, so
Mm-hmm.
that's what must happen, right?
Yeah.
But from the player's perspective, at least, when there is so much content coming, it makes me wonder, why are you even bothering? If next level games could make a better Mario Strikers game that
Mm-hmm.
releases in February of 2023,
Yeah.
and that game sells month upon month upon month, people are playing it constantly.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like there's at least a huge upside there to investigate.
Yeah.
Because if your game comes and goes, you probably are going to scoop 2-3 million sales out of that game. But I see a future where Mario Strikers sells 5 or 6 million copies when it's
Yeah.
a better game.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think again, as I was saying, I don't really know. It's hard to read Nintendo. They're
Yeah.
a fucking enigma. It's hard to understand what's going through the big boss's mind, especially when they make decisions like that. But I think I would pull it back to what I was saying of it feeling imbalanced, and I think that's also true on a larger scale. You're talking about as I said, game to game. Some games feeling very content light, and admittedly those are the minority of the first party games released on Switch. But then other games being completely content rich. But that is also true on a larger scale. As I was saying, 2017 banger 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 banger. 2018 let's fill in the year a little bit before we reach obviously what the year was leading to, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. 2019 all these games that are B tier titles but pretty much across the board very content rich. And then 2020, that's its own case, and maybe that has compounded 2021 and 2022 a little bit, but then drought. Okay, we're back to we got to release in the last half of last year, BDSP and Mario Party Superstars and Metroid Dread and Wario Get Together, and these games are coming out on top of each other, and then we're having the same flow happen again this year.
Yeah.
Where, frankly, I think that at the end of this year, a lot of these games are going to end up cannibalizing each other in terms of attention. And obviously, the market as a whole is very crowded this year because we've had such a dip in terms of the summer. But I don't know business. I can't read Nintendo. But I think I totally agree about these games that are launching content. We've had conversations about this before, of course.
Yeah.
This is an ongoing thing as a game like Battle League comes out, and people are like, yeah, this is the same thing that happened with Aces. It's the same thing that happened with Super Rush and ARMS and Kirby Star Allies and
even Mario Maker.
Oh yeah,
World Builder took 8 months to arrive.
Yeah. But I think that maybe Nintendo just realizes that they don't, and this is cynical and it is doomer pilled, don't really need to care, because the games that are doing very well are the ones that are content rich. On the whole, of course, there's some exceptions where a game will be content light but sell very well. And that pushes the Switch to do fucking gangbusters. And when people think about the Switch, they're gonna be like, yeah, we got Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey and a bunch of Pokemon games and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And it's not going to really ever factor into their mind that in 2018, Mario Tennis Aces launched content light.
Yeah.
And then, it filled in later down the line. But I think what Nintendo realizes is that they can get away with this. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, and I absolutely wish that they didn't. I would love a better Super Rush, a better Nintendo Switch Sports. But they can release this game, backfill, sell a couple copies, make sure that there's a slot filled in the year. We have our summer games now. It was Nintendo Switch Sports and Mario Strikers Battle League. And then no one's going to pay attention to those. Because by the end of the year, everyone's so inundated with Pokemon and Mario & Rabbids and Bayonetta and Splatoon and Xenoblade that who the fuck's going to pay attention to that?
Michael, I think you're right. But then at what point, then why did you even bother?
Sure, no, that's true.
If you're releasing a game that's going to have a sort of shelf life, quote unquote, obviously it's going to sell and continue to sell.
Yeah.
But if it's going to matter for 2 months, why did you even release it? You know what I mean? I think back to, because I think the content will light thing is one part of the equation. These games with more time would be richer, would be better, and I think that's everyone's benefit.
Would sell better, would be added to that library of great games on the Switch,
Right. I mean, think about Fire Emblem Warriors, the first Fire Emblem Warriors, not the second one. First Farm Wars launched 1 week before Super Mario Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
There was no reason to do that.
Absolutely not.
And that's what it comes down to. It feels like there's
You hold that game to mid 2018, it does way better.
that's way better.
Oh
Because
well,
it's not a bad
actually,
game.
what about Hyrule Warriors fucking definitive edition? Those
Which
games
launched,
also launched like too close to each other.
and that game launched within a couple weeks of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze.
Yeah.
I think you're right about the Nintendo thing, and we can read some of the way into Nintendo's calculus again. I think it probably just comes back to flood the zone with shit we make 100% of the money is earned, right?
Yeah.
So that motivates. But let's think from a player's perspective for a second, right? Because frankly, that's where I think we can talk a bit more concretely.
Yeah.
I,
I'm a player.
I think that there's a real problem, and I certainly was contributing to this problem for a long time with what I was saying and writing and everything, but I've kind of changed my perspective on this a little bit. And I feel like I need to keep trending this direction. Of expecting Nintendo to just release games
You need to atone
constantly.
for your sins.
Yes. Of Nintendo needing to release games constantly.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just to nobody's benefit. And because I think you're right about this holiday season. When Bayonetta's release date was announced, you were like, there's too much shit, coming out, there's too much shit coming out. I'm like, it doesn't really matter. They're to different demographics, to X and Y and Z or whatever. But it's to nobody's benefit that they release that close to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what I was trying to get at when all those announcements were happening.
Yeah, and if you save one of those for 2023, great, right? You don't need a new game from Nintendo every month. But it feels like that's what we're trying to push for. That's what we need the direct, so we know what 4 games are releasing before the next direct happens, right? And I feel like we're just tripping over our own feet at a certain point, expecting out of Nintendo what's resulting in a worse product. Now, you're totally right. The games sell anyway. Nobody gives a shit. I just want some YouTube. I forget who it was. One of the Nintendo YouTubers posted like, "Man, it really sucks seeing this free update to Nintendo Switch Sports come out as like a leg strap thing."
Yeah.
And somebody replied with a meme that's like, "My brother in Christ, but you bought the game." And then YouTuber was like,
point. Yeah.
The YouTuber was like, "Yeah, but I bought the game because I was under the pretense it was going to be a good game and X, Y, and Z." And both sides, I think, are right.
Yeah.
And as long as we keep buying everything Nintendo puts out, the problem's not going to change.
Yeah.
But we're just so impatient for new software, I think. And I think we need to pump that brake a little bit. And that's something I'm going to start doing in my discussion of Nintendo moving forward, because I just don't see the value in expecting games constantly when the multiplayer games that come out aren't ready, and the single player games that come out often are in such close proximity that by the time we're trying to digest one, we're on to the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Triangle Strategy and Kirby, different demographics, but one's a fucking Square Enix RPG, exclusive RPG, and one's a huge 3D platformer. Those games should both have time to strengthen Nintendo's library as its diversity.
Yeah.
But you're not giving anybody time to enjoy that. All anybody's doing is just looking forward to the next game of the next month. And I think releasing a game a month is just an unsustainable and unnecessary thing to do.
Yeah, I do absolutely agree with that. As a player, I don't play everything that comes out. I try my best to keep up with what Nintendo does, but there are even things that slip through the cracks with that. Like even in 2020, which was a light year, I only played to a good extent one of the games that they put out that year, and it was Animal Crossing. And of course, that was its own thing, and that game had its time to shine, unlike almost any other game ever. But I didn't play Origami King. I never got into Worldwide 51 Worldwide Classics fucking Clubhouse games.
Best game of 2020.
Yeah. But I also don't know if, for me, it's that bad if games are releasing constantly, if it's not ones that everyone is interested in. And I think that maybe that is Nintendo's thought process here. And I like what you said initially about how for these other consoles until the Switch, we needed to lean on first-party games pretty much exclusively to drive hardware and keep interest going. That is not true with the Switch anymore, but I don't think that mindset has ever left them.
No.
And frankly, I don't see a world where they do stop that mindset, even if it does result in these flubs as we're talking about, because it still results in them putting out a lot of games and most of them being high quality. But as a player, and I think reading into the mindset of most people who are Nintendo players, not every game speaks to everyone. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is going to sell, 4 million copies, maybe?
Probably.
And that means that 90% of the Switch's player base plus will never touch that game, which means that August and by extension July, that there's no game for them for that month, and so then they're really excited when Pokemon comes out. You
Yeah.
can apply that to Bayonetta and Mario and Rabbids as well. Those games are certainly not going to sell anywhere near what Splatoon and Pokemon are going. So then, for most people, this year is Kirby, Splatoon, Pokemon. And that's 3 games in a year. And
Sure.
so really, I think the problem only comes down to the hardcore, the most hardcore of hardcore Nintendo fans. You and me who are interested in keeping up with what Nintendo are doing. And now we're realizing, damn, it's kind of going to be tough. Especially considering that you and I are also interested in games on other platforms. But we're the ones that this is impacting negatively. But frankly, I don't think it's impacting Nintendo negatively. I mean, maybe on a perception level of these games coming out underbaked. But also, the Switch is still selling well. Most people are not going to be engaging with all these games. They're not even going to realize that these games are coming out on top of each other. It still adds to the Switch's extensive library if these games are all coming out. So, like, I think in Nintendo's mind, it's a pros and cons game. You sacrifice Nintendo Switch Sports to have a Switch Sports game on this system.
Right.
And when people think about the Switch years later, they're not going to care that the game was underbaked, and I wish that these games were all great. I wish that they waited. I wish that these games came out all content rich. But I don't think that crosses Nintendo's mind. I don't think it crosses most players' minds. And from that angle, I can't really hold any of this in too much contempt on a personal level because I'm still getting plenty of games that are great, frankly. And that's sort of been my philosophy as a game player recently. Like, yeah, some games will come out and disappoint me, but it's okay if something else is right around the corner that does look great, that does excite me. And then that cycle repeats, and maybe that is a little bit cynical, but for me, it's just kind of realistic, and it means that I don't come down on this maybe as hard as you do.
I just think that it's just not a sign of a good production schedule when sort of
true, absolutely true.
Right. When the mindset is, well, okay, if the game is bad, the next game is coming in 6 weeks, so who cares, right? And obviously, what you said is more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, it's like you're totally right. Nintendo released Nintendo Switch Sports and marketed it like a Wii Sports game. Jean was like, let's play Wii Sports, whatever that one's called. Literally, that's how she refers to Nintendo Sports. So Nintendo got in, they got their money and got out, right? But that doesn't make it good. They did that, right? And I think a Nintendo that is so clearly focused on releasing a game that just fills a calendar slot is not to anybody's benefit, right?
Sure.
How many years did they take to do Wii Sports Resort? 3 years, I think. No, longer than that. I don't fucking remember the exact release dates. The point is, they took a lot of time. They could have pumped out Nintendo Switch 2, Wii Sports 2 right away, a year later, and on name alone did that. But Nintendo had this feeling of, let's take some time here. Let's develop a real proper sequel, right?
Yeah.
But in this era, when they don't have to be doing that, they're just saying we need a Switch game, we need a sports game. Who knows? Pandemic restraint. Japan's not still, issues with work from home, whatever. We're just going to drop the game out. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me because the game's not that good. And I would rather advocate, even though it's not a material issue, I'd rather advocate for Nintendo making a better product.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's a larger scale issue because you're right. No, material doesn't matter. But you were talking about how for, the majority of players, the year is Kirby, what do you say? Kirby, Splatoon,
Pokemon. That in terms of scale of sales.
Yeah, but even in that case, even if Pokemon sells 15, 20 million copies, let's say for easy math, I'm not good at math, we're going to say it sells 20 million copies.
Sure.
That's a 20% attach rate of 100 million, roughly. These are all rough figures.
Yes. Very
Very good attach rate, but that's still 80% of your player base not playing that game.
100%.
Point being, it doesn't matter, really. You could take time. There's so many players who are not going to buy any particular game, but you have no necessary imperative to just say, okay, we need to have this game out right now.
Sure.
You can take your time, right? But here's a problem. Large-scale problem with what you're saying.
Uh-oh.
Nintendo needs to get away from their audience understanding a year on their platform as Kirby, Splatoon, Pokemon.
Sure.
That's not good because you think about PlayStation again for a second. You could think about PlayStation's year as Horizon, Gran Turismo,
God of Jesus Christ, Gran Turismo came out.
Horizon, Gran Turismo, Last of Us Part 1, God of War, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But that's not how anybody thinks about PlayStation, unless you're a sicko, because Elden Ring matters way more than any of those games combined on PlayStation, right?
Yeah.
there's an understanding that a year for these other platforms is more than their exclusives. And we get
Yep.
into this sort of mindset when we're talking to these platforms, it is about the exclusives, right?
Mhm.
We have an in-depth conversation about what exclusives did Microsoft release in X year, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, who really gives a shit? Because everyone's playing Elden Ring on their Xbox. What
Yeah.
does it matter, right? But we still hyper focus on Nintendo being only Nintendo games.
Yeah.
And for the health of their platform and them as a company moving forward, they need to be more than that, right?
Sure.
I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that Nintendo lives and dies only by its own software.
Hmm.
Obviously, Nintendo's a software maker. That's where they make their money, right?
Yeah.
It's their bread and butter. But they have an opportunity here finally to say third parties are important to us again.
Yeah.
And if your pie wedge is 75% our sales, 25% the other guy's sales on my platform, well then that's not very good because
Mhm.
you need to be making that other people's pie wedge bigger and bigger and bigger before you diversify your platform and you don't have to rely so heavily on your own stuff.
Yeah.
Because when there's production issues, when these games come out underbaked, and there's nobody there to support you, you're going to be wishing that you cultivated these relationships a little bit better.
Yeah.
Is in a place right here where they can say, hey, we can make third party important again.
Yeah.
And we can be an ecosystem that is not so walled off like the Wii U was, right?
Mm.
There was like 4 Wii U third party games of any
Yes.
repute, right? That's an exaggeration. There's a couple, but there was basically nothing.
Yeah.
Nintendo could cultivate a better ecosystem,
Yeah.
but instead it's all about let's drop games, let's fucking throw out Kirby here and cannibalize a Square Enix game
Sure.
in
Yeah.
X and Y and Z. They need to treat their partners' games with a little bit more respect. And I
Yeah.
think that requires not overshadowing them with games that
Mm.
ultimately, while not going to be affected sales wise because they come out bad or people are going to buy them regardless, there's opportunity cost to not allowing your partners the space to kind of flourish a little bit finally,
Yeah.
because Nintendo's third
Absolutely.
party support is never going to actually get better if third party games continue to ostensibly not matter to the ecosystem.
Yeah. I think. I, I'm a broken record here. I absolutely
Sure.
do agree with you.
Yeah.
I think that what is interesting about the Switch is that it is ostensibly, as you were saying, the first time where this change in company psychology is frankly what we're rallying for here. We're like,
Yeah.
please hire up at Nintendo's. Release less games because X, Y, and Z. And obviously, I'm completely on your side with that. But this is
Yeah.
really the first time that option has been viable. The Wii U, if the Wii U didn't have it's inconsistent, but number of first party games coming out, that system would have done even worse than it did. But you can even
Yeah.
feel the, hey, we need to be releasing games mentality in 2015 and 2016, which some people say
Mm-hmm.
are the worst years of Nintendo's first party output ever. But even then, you didn't have that other stuff to lean back on. I think that what I can only hope, and of course,
Yeah.
future projection, we have no idea what's going to happen in the future with Nintendo's future consoles, their future output slate, is that now that they realize that these games, people what are third-party games, are being put out in their system, they are doing very, very well, at least comparatively to previous systems. A lot of indie games sell their best on Switch, and
Yeah.
we're, for the first time in a while, getting a decent number of third-party exclusives from Square Enix. You got your Astral Chain, you got Daemon X Machina, things like that. Um, that they can allow that to happen. I think we're in a good place for that to happen. Maybe not the end of this year, but
Yeah.
hopefully going forward with things like partner directs. That is way
Yeah.
more attention than we've ever seen put on third-party content from official Nintendo sources. This is only these games. We know that these partners are important, and we're showing off all these ports. For you, when we were watching that was a little bit underwhelming because it wasn't new content. But it does
Yeah.
show a healthy support from the entire
True.
industry that they want to get their games on this system and presumably sell pretty well. But then unfortunately that's unbalanced by the fact that a lot of these games are going to be consumed in these first party and second party and third party partnerships that are dominating the rest of this year. And so
Yeah.
when actually Persona 5 as a port will probably do pretty well in terms of its own
Sure.
space on Nintendo Switch. But a lot of these games that are coming out within the next part of this year or early next year aren't going to be able to get a chance to shine. But also then most of those are ports. They are older games, so I can understand why you don't want to lean solely on releasing Nier on your Switch for a month for that to be like the focus you're giving to third parties. But I do think the psychology is changing, as we've seen with partner showcases being a thing, with there being a lot more third-party support on Nintendo Switch. But we just have to wait and see. I don't think that there's any future where third-party support drops off as vastly as it has in the past, considering that they are cultivating these partnerships with a lot more people than they have been. But also, Nintendo does need to learn that it is okay to allow space for these games, and maybe give more attention to third-party partnerships that allows those to blossom even further. But again, totally wait and see, but hopefully Nintendo allows themselves to be balanced a little bit, because I think the most interesting thing you said here is how we compare this to PlayStation and Xbox. And I admit, I am completely the guy that is exclusives from these people are the most important things they do this year. And that is because I have been trained as a Nintendo player that is really all that matters. And frankly, I don't play that many third-party games on my Switch. I believe when we did our top games on Switch video, I was like, whew, I think I just played Doom in terms of like big third-party games on Nintendo Switch. But I can't even remember where I'm really going with that. But it's something that maybe I should reconsider in terms of my own psychology and how considering what Nintendo does. But frankly, I'm very happy with this year. I think 2 down games, as it seems, is totally fine in a year where, frankly, we're getting a lot of games that I'm very excited for and do seem very high quality. Let's check back in on that at the end of the year and see if some of these games do not quite hit the highs that they could. But 1 or 2 games that don't hit for me or hit for larger scale doesn't really rub me the wrong way too personally. So that's my closing statement on this.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm not going to let you end the video here, though, as much as you'd like to, because here's the thing, right? I think you make a good point, but then I guess it's my closing statement too. I don't give a hoot. Here's what I think, right? Nintendo Switch Sports and that other game, Strikers, Battle League, were not ready.
Yeah.
Released on top of each other anyway. Not directly on top of each other, but close. And those games both would have benefited from more time.
Yeah.
Square Enix comes along and makes you two exclusive JRPGs.
Yeah.
And you release your own games on top of them both times.
Mm-hmm.
Kirby and Xenoblade. And Xenoblade is an even more direct threat to Live Alive.
I believe there's also another Switch exclusive Square game. Yeah, that one, yeah. That's coming out in the fucking mishmash somewhere.
Right. And then you get Platinum Games to make you an exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
You get Ubisoft to make you an exclusive.
Yeah.
And you release them on top of each other.
Yep.
And you release them right between your 2 biggest games of the year. It makes no sense. No. And it's not good for cultivating the relationships you have with these companies that are very important. It's not good for giving your players time to enjoy everything. Mm-hmm. It's not good for setting an expectation of, a reasonable amount of content output. It's not good for having software into 2023 consistency. If Nintendo was like, we do 1 game a quarter, you could then that would be fair, right? But if you set the expectation that we're doing a game every month, mm-hmm. but then sometimes some months you're releasing 2 games, and all of a sudden we're going into 2023 with, okay, I don't know how the fuck we're possibly going to just match what we did.
Yeah.
It doesn't set good expectations.
No.
All around, I think less software results in higher quality software, and more time for more games to shine.
Sure.
And none of that's happening.
No.
But I'm going to buy them anyway because I'm a hypocrite and a loser.
Yeah, absolutely true. And we will be discussing these games because we're hypocrites and losers. All right. No matter how tempting it is, no more vagina talk on Backlog Banter for today. I know how tempted you are. Hold it back, though.